Welcome to the Evolution of Immunity module. In this talk, we're going to learn about the protective defenses that protists have evolved. We will begin with looking at the characteristics of the immune system in higher organisms and proceed to look at different mechanisms that unicellular organisms use to protect themselves, and these include prokaryotes as well as protists. The immune system in higher organisms is highly evolved, and this is due to the fact that many different types of organisms are able to cause diseases in higher organisms. Thus, the higher organisms have to have mechanism to provide protection against these different types of pathogens. The pathogens can be viruses, which we should note are non-living organisms, or they can be unicellular organisms like bacteria. Fungi are also known to infect higher organisms, and fungi can be unicellular or multicellular. Protists, which are eukaryotic organisms, can also infect higher organisms, and worms like helminths are also known to cause infections in higher organisms. Thus, the higher organisms have a variety of organisms that they have to defend themselves against. They are able to do so by producing many different types of antimicrobial compounds, as well as synthesizing different types of proteins that help in the recognition of pathogens. They have also evolved mechanisms to make variations of same type of proteins that enable in the recognition and elimination of different types of pathogens. The immune system of higher organisms also retains the memory of pathogens. Thus, the immune system of higher organisms is a product of millions of years of evolution. In order to understand how such a complex system has evolved in higher organisms, let us first look at the different defenses that lower organisms or simpler organisms like prokaryotes and protists have evolved. Prokaryotes are the earliest living forms that evolved on Earth, and they can be grouped in the kingdom of eubacteria and archaebacteria. Prokaryotes are unicellular, and they do not have membrane-bound organelles inside their cells. They compete with each other for space and nutrients, and so they have evolved different mechanisms to protect themselves from other organisms. These include the production of toxins to prevent the growth of other types of prokaryotes or even simpler eukaryotes. Additionally, prokaryotes can be infected by viruses, and thus they have mechanisms to protect themselves against viruses. This is usually done by preventing the absorption and entry of viruses, synthesizing enzymes like restriction endonuclease that can degrade viral DNA, disrupting the viral life cycle, and evolving the CRISPR-Cas system, which is a system that is able to not only protect against viruses, but maintain memory of viruses that have infected the organism previously. Protists are organisms that evolved from archaebacteria, and they are eukaryotes that belong to the domain of eukarya and the kingdom of Protista. They mostly comprise of unicellular organisms, even though there are some multicellular members. And it should be noted that Protista is the most diverse kingdom. It's considered as the most diverse kingdom because of the variety of organisms that are present in it. These include the fungi-like organisms that have a cell wall but are heterotrophs. You also have plant-like organisms in the kingdom of Protista, which also have a cell wall, but they are autotrophs, which means they're able to synthesize their own carbon sources for energy. These include organisms like diatoms, the dinoflagellates, and the volvox. We also have the different types of algae like the green algae, the red algae, or the brown algae. and they all belong to the kingdom of Protista. We also have animal-like organisms in the kingdom of Protista, and these are mostly unicellular organisms that do not have a cell wall, and they are heterotrophs. These include organisms like sporozoa that are able to make spores, the ciliates like Paramecium and Tetrahymena that have cilia that allow them to move, the zooflagellates that have flagella to help with locomotion, and then the pseudopods like amoeba that have the structures called as pseudopods which allow them to move. Protists are eukaryotic organisms that have membrane-bound structures. This has allowed these organisms to evolve cellular processes like phagocytosis and exocytosis. Protists are able to protect themselves from other organisms by employing different strategies. One strategy is the synthesis of toxic chemicals. This strategy is observed in prokaryotes as well and hence is an evolutionarily conserved strategy. Prokaryotes have also evolved membrane-bound organelles like lysosomes, which have digestive enzymes in them that can act on different types of macromolecules. Lysosomes can be used to kill microbes, and as shown in this figure, if a protist is able to take up a bacterium by phagocytosis, it retains it in a vesicle, and ultimately this vesicle can fuse with the lysosome. Once this fusion occurs, the enzymes present in the lysosome can act on that bacterium and kill that bacterium. This way, lysosomes can be used for defense purposes as well as for digestion and obtaining nutrition. Protists can also make these structures called as extrasomes, which are membrane-bound vesicles with molecules in them that are released into the environment by exocytosis. There are different types of extrasomes, and one of them are the trichocysts, which provide mechanical defense. When we look at the figure to the right, we are observing a paramecium, which is a ciliated protist, and we can see the trichocyst present throughout the cell, but if we focus on the part that is outlined in blue, those dot-like structures are the trichocysts. When we look at a magnified view of this structure, then the trichocyst is actually a spindle-shaped structure. In this video, we're going to look at the trichocysts in action. So we have a paramecium that is present. And when we look at this paramecium, we can see the cilia all around it. And what we're going to observe now is the formation of these different trichocysts that were released to form the spindle fibers. In addition to trichocysts, protists also have extrasomes that can act as chemical defenses. The different types of extrasomes that act as a chemical defense strategy are the pigmentocysts, mucocysts, haptocysts, toxocysts, etc. All of these will have chemicals. For example, mucocysts will have mucus, or toxocysts can have toxic compounds that are released into the environment and can then help the protist defend itself from other organisms. Protists have also evolved defenses to protect themselves from foreign DNA or viruses, and this is called as RNA interference. RNA interference is a mechanism to protect against viruses, and it has similarities to the CRISPR-Cas system that is found in prokaryotes. To look at the eukaryotic system that helps in protection against viruses, if double-stranded RNA that is not part of the cell, which has been obtained either from a virus or from the environment, comes inside the cell, then it is recognized by a complex of proteins called dicer. Dicer has endonuclease activity, and thus it can cleave this double-stranded RNA to smaller fragments that are called as small interfering RNA. These double-stranded small interfering RNA then associate with another complex called as the RISC or organoid complex. These small interfering RNA duplexes are then dissociated to form single-stranded small interfering RNA that remain associated with the RISC organoid complex. This complex that has the small interfering RNA can now form complementary base pairs with target RNA that may have been introduced in the cell due to a viral infection. And by forming these complementary interactions, the RISC organoid complex is able to cleave that target RNA, and this way protection against viruses is obtained. With this, we come to the end of our talk, where we learned about the characteristics of the immune system in higher organisms, followed by the mechanisms that prokaryotes and protists use to defend themselves.